Smartwatches have picked up so much steam for the past 5 years, it's actually starting to get a little bit out of hand. I feel like you can't even go outside anymore without finding at least one person who actively uses a smartwatch every single day. It feels like everybody has just collectively agreed to cosplay as Ben 10 and just walk around with this giant watch that is constantly telling them their heart rate and shoving a notification right in their face. And more often than not, the watch that you're gonna find on everybody's wrist is going to be the Apple Watch. This watch is actually just a dream come true of my younger self because I was obsessed with watches when I was growing up. I even used to mow a bunch of lawns so that I could save up enough money to buy, I don't even remember what brand it was, but it was some type of smartwatch, I guess you could call it, from like 2010 that would play old movies or just any type of video on your wrist. So I'd plug in my headphones and then I'd watch SpongeBob on my wrist. And as I was thinking about this old watch that I would use to view SpongeBob episodes on, I started to wonder, what did we actually have before the Apple Watch? And that led me down a crazy rabbit hole that actually ended up just looping back to where I started with Apple. This right here is the iPod Nano 6th generation, but it can also be called the very first Apple Watch. And so today I wanted to overdose a little bit off of some nostalgia and dive back to 2010 to see what it was like to have an Apple Watch before they were even selling Apple Watches. The Apple Watch is truly what revolutionized a lot of smartwatches with health tracking, notifications, and of course the seamless Apple ecosystem integration. I think every single Apple fanboy has probably used the word ecosystem like 3,000 times when trying to convince anybody to buy an Apple product. But it's true, unfortunately. The Apple Watch works so well with the iPhone, and that's what's created such a popular device and product for Apple. The Apple Watch released in April of 2015, and it quickly took over as some type of status symbol among different consumers. Apple even thought it would be a good idea to release an 18-karat gold edition Apple Watch for like $10,000. And I don't know who's buying this, and I feel bad for anybody who did buy it. Initially, I think it took a little bit of time for everybody to come around to the idea of a smartwatch. I don't think everybody was on board right away, but as Apple kept chipping away and making different models and honestly improving each generation, it started to become pretty normal to buy and wear an Apple Watch. But the thing that started this avalanche of smartwatches back in the day was actually just a simple little iPod. I bought this iPod Nano for about $50 on eBay, and it also came with the original iPod Nano, so I thought it was a pretty solid deal, and I honestly didn't know what type of shape or condition it was going to be before purchasing this. I just knew I wanted to see what the original Apple Watch looked like and actually felt like. Now, the iPod Nano is a very interesting device, especially in Apple's lineup of products, because every single generation that we've gotten of the Nano has been, it feels like, very different, and they're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall to see what would stick. It launched in 2005 as the replacement for the iPod Mini, and like I said, each generation just got smaller, slimmer, or more futuristic. And I love this generation because you can see that Apple were just trying to take a giant leap of faith when it came to the iPod and do something different that they've never done before with this generation specifically.
Imagine this. You're in your room playing video games again. Until suddenly, tragedy strikes.
Shook those hands when around that spot. Got 5 years in, tell me where that shot. Too many people to count on my hand.
Go listen to the Isaac App music if you want to hear some mid-white rap.
To get into the build quality, this is typical Apple fashion. Everything feels pretty solid, pretty sleek. It's got the aluminum body, and the buttons, of course, are very tactile and feel great to press down. And like I discussed, it's literally just a cube, like a tiny little screen with not too much going on. Apple really removed a lot of excess when it came to this generation of the Nano. And I don't know about you, but I actually forgot that the 5th generation Nano is literally just one big clip. And funny enough, this clip is literally the reason why I love this iPod so much. Not only is it tiny, but you can just clip it to your shirt or your pants or your belt, and you have very quick access to your music or whatever song you're playing, and it's right there. You can put this on a backpack, you can clip it to your hat, your clothes, you could close a bag of chips. You could quite literally put this and place it anywhere that you need immediate access. And as somebody who's never owned this generation of an iPod, it's actually been really cool to just clip it wherever I need to, or slip this in my pocket, and I don't even notice it's there because it's so tiny. This is the 8GB version, and so far it's been pretty decent for me. It's definitely on the smaller end, of course, if you're somebody who has a lot of music in their catalog, but for me, I think 8GB is pretty good and manageable, and you can fit a decent amount of albums without it just getting completely filled up within like 3 or 4 albums, as long as you keep the file size a little bit more compressed and you're not using only maybe FLAC files. But even if you're using that, it should still do the job fine. I did make a video on the iPod Classic, and one of the biggest issues that I had was just that iPod specifically was way too big. It was just so chunky, and I honestly stopped using it as like a music listening device whenever I go out all the time. And in that video, I did explain the benefits of using an iPod Classic or just an iPod in general, and it obviously still applies to the 5th generation Nano. Using a dedicated music device has changed so much about how I consume music, and it's fixed a lot of nasty habits that I was unfortunately consuming music with. Now, people immediately noticed with the iPod Nano 5th generation that it was small enough to even resemble something like the face of a watch. And third-party companies also realized this and immediately jumped on the idea of creating a product that would turn this beautiful iPod into the first ever Apple Watch. Now, interestingly enough, Apple didn't officially market it as a watch, but the company itself definitely noticed that it could resemble a watch, and there were actually employees, according to Steve Jobs, that wanted to use this thing as a watch, and so as a result, they added watch faces to the iPod Nano.
Got a clock. We've got one of our board of director members is going to clip it onto an armband as a watch.
Little did those people know that just in a decade, everybody would start to wear an Apple Watch. Now, when it comes to creating the Nano watch, it's actually pretty simple, at least with the accessory that I've got here. All you have to do is just open up the clip and then slide the iPod into the little watch band, and it clips on perfectly. And it's really sturdy. The engineering and the design process of this is flawless, and it truly does feel just like a goofy Apple Watch. Whenever you place this thing on your wrist, it feels pretty goofy. As somebody who wears an Apple Watch pretty consistently, this thing is considerably a lot bigger, okay, than the normal Apple Watch. But it's not horrible by any means. The band itself is like silicone and like kind of rubbery feeling, and it's somewhat similar, honestly, to the band that I use daily for my Apple Watch. Now, we know the iPod is great as a separate external music player, but how does it actually work and function as a watch? Mostly, you're gonna be somewhat disappointed, especially if you expect this thing to be anything close to an Apple Watch. You're essentially just given access to only the clock faces and your music, because that's really all the iPod Nano does. This thing clearly doesn't connect to your phone or display any notifications or have any special information to be displayed to you, but it's still cool whenever you go into the watch section that this does just turn into a normal watch. There's also a fitness app that's sponsored with Nike that I guess Apple managed to finagle at the time, and it can track your steps, or you could go for a run. You can clearly see that they were kind of building this vision of creating some type of watch that could play your media, play some music for you, but also track your health and fitness. Now, for the past couple of days, I did actually decide to wear this thing out and about and look absolutely goofy, because this might be the ugliest watch on the face of the earth. But I did wear it for a couple of days as a watch and use it for a few different activities to see what it was like to use this device and use an iPod as my main watch. And at the end of the day, the only thing I could say about this thing is that it worked. It did the job. If I wanted to check the time, I'd look at my watch and I'd go, wow, it's 3:35 p.m. Or I'd go to my watch and I'd change the song, and that was about it. And this does not have Bluetooth, so you do have to plug in your headphones. So whenever I was listening to music, I felt super awkward because you could see where my headphones were wired to, and it was connected to my iPod Nano on my wrist. So I was walking around campus or just doing any physical exercise looking like an absolute goober on the field because I'm like connected to my watch with my headphones, looking like some cyborg from like 2005. But besides looking like a weirdo, it didn't really get in the way too much. And I thought that initially the headphones would kind of, rub up against me, or maybe I'd knock my earbuds out of my ears because they're connected to my wrist, but that didn't really become an issue at all. I was even able to rock climb with this thing on and using it as just like an iPod connected. So if I was able to rock climb, you could pretty much do anything you need to with this original Apple Watch. And I'd say the best part about using this as a replacement for your Apple Watch is just the fact that you don't get bombarded with notifications, and you don't actually get as distracted as you normally would with something like a regular Apple Watch. But that's just like such a stupid thing to be hyped about, because at that point, like, just wear a normal watch or turn your notifications off. Clearly there's no like justifiable reason as to why you'd ever want to use this over a regular Apple Watch, or just a regular watch in general, unless you really wanted to look like an absolute hipster. If somebody asks you, hey, what kind of watch is that? And you go, oh, it's the iPod Nano. It's not an actual Apple Watch. They're gonna be like, okay, cool. So overall, yes, this thing does suck, and it's clearly the first generation of the Apple Watch. And no, it does not replace the current Apple Watch, but it was really cool to see, where this was headed and where Apple kind of started to branch into different ideas. And I think that's actually why the next generation of the iPod Nano was not the similar square form factor. I literally think Apple created this little iPod Nano 5th generation. They saw that it could become a watch, and they said, okay, let's actually save that idea, start working on the Apple Watch, and then just go back to the normal Nano form factor. And that's why we never got this same cube or square shape ever again, because Apple knew, let's just start making a watch. And I think the most valuable thing I got out of this entire process was literally just realizing how sick the original iPod Nano 5th generation is as a standalone media device. It even outperforms my 5th generation classic, which I know everybody loves those type of iPods. Like, I think if you're gonna get into the iPod space, most people are gonna buy that classic edition. And I didn't even mention battery life, but this thing so far has been working really well for me and lasting for most of the week. I've only had to charge it one time throughout this past week, and I've used it about every day for, I'd say, an hour or two on and off. But take that with a grain of salt, because sometimes you can buy iPods on like eBay and the batteries are like fried or completely cooked. And of course, this is a, relatively older device, so you don't even know what type of battery that you're going to get. So it definitely is a little bit of a gamble. Even if you buy any type of iPod, you're going to be dealing with that issue, unfortunately. I'm pleasantly surprised, and I'm going to be keeping this thing now as my main device to play music with. And I'm considering just selling my 5th generation classic now, because I can't understand why I need anything else besides this beautiful, beautiful clip for my bag of chips. But yeah, that's about it. I felt like yapping about this device for the entire video. I also rap. I make music. If you're interested in listening to any of that stuff, the link is going to be in the description below if you're into hip hop. But other than that, it was super fun to get to try out this little device, and I'll hopefully see you in the next video. See ya.